right, everybody, welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show. I'm your host, Philip Drew, and joining me on the phone is Larry Syverson from Military Families Speak Out. He spends his lunch hour every day in front of the federal courthouse in Richmond, Virginia, protesting against the war. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on your show today.
Now, in reading about you on the Internet, I found that you have 4 sons in the military. Is that right?
Well, I have 4 sons, and all 4 did join the military, 2 Army, 2 Navy. And, in fact, during a time in 1998, the son never set on our family. I had a son in Korea, one in Germany, one on the East Coast, and one in Seattle. So we're a strong military family, and one of the sons ended up getting claustrophobia on submarines and got a medical discharge. He was unfit for sea duty. But at the present time, I have 3 and 2 Army, 1 Navy.
And are any of them in Iraq right now, or they've all been brought home?
My oldest son, Brandon, went into Tikrit in April. He's with the 4th Infantry out of Fort Hood, and he went in April of last year. And March 11th, he got back to Fort Hood. And my youngest son, Bryce, is with the 1st Armored out of Germany, and he went in May. He went into Baghdad, and in early April, he went into Kuwait on his way back to Baumholder, and after 1 week in Kuwait, he was sent back into Iraq. And the administration is saying that they'll be in for 90 days. That's what they're saying to the press. But they told the soldiers and the families they would be there for 120 days. But on Monday, Bryce sent me an email from Baghdad and said that Sanchez had signed the papers, and it can be a 6-month extension. He'll be there a total of, it could be 18 months.
You completely caught me by surprise there. You mean on TV they're saying a certain amount of time, and the actual time is going to be double that?
I got an email from Bryce saying that Sanchez had signed it for 180 days or 6 months, and he said generally what Sanchez signs in paper comes true. So the soldiers are looking at it now that they'll be there for 6 months, additional months.
Well, you know, many military families are very proud of their soldiers over there liberating Iraq, and I wonder what makes you different from them. Why are you so opposed to this war?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of my sons. I don't know of many other people that had 2 sons at the same time, especially as frontline troops, one a master gunner on tanks and one a gunner on a Bradley fighting vehicle. But having sons in the military, they've been in dangerous places before, and I've always supported their efforts. But this time around, the causes for going into Iraq did not arise to where I thought it was worth having their lives on the line.
So it's not a matter of their lives being at risk, but this particular war and having their lives at risk in this particular war.
No. Brandon twice has been deployed along the DMZ in Korea, and the first time he went there in the 80s, it was considered a dangerous deployment. And Bryce, being in the 1st Armored out of Baumholder, he is trained as a peacekeeper, and he's gone in and out of the Balkans. And in '98, he was the first group of peacekeepers to go into Bosnia-Herzegovina, and he got war pay for that. It was considered dangerous. And then in '99, during the Kosovo conflict, Bryce was in Albania on the Kosovo border, and if the bombing of Belgrade had not been successful to have the Milosevic back down, he would have been in the invasion forces for Kosovo. And I've supported the Balkan deployments and the Korean deployments for my son. So since '89, Iraq has been the first time I've been against one of their deployments.
I'm kind of confused. Why would you be for the war against Serbia but not the war against Iraq?
Well, we went in we went in as peacekeepers in to the Balkans, and there was ethnic cleansing going on in Kosovo, but it would have been different if the president said, we're going in to liberate the Iraqis, we're going in to give them a democracy. That's not what the drumbeats to war were about. The drumbeats to war were about weapons of mass destruction and connections with Al-Qaeda and connections with 9/11. And it was none of that has panned out. And I don't like being lied to and have my son sent into combat and not be told the truth to begin with. Not be told the truth.
I understand, but if they had said that the war was to liberate the people of Iraq and give them a democracy, that would have been okay? To invade the country on that basis?
Probably not. I just don't think we should be in... I don't see why we're the police force and why we need to be going in invading countries. It just makes no sense to me. I don't see how that is defending the country by invading a country that none of its neighbors took part in the invasion because they did not think that Iraq was a threat to them. And so when we're halfway around the world, 8 time zones away, how can we think they were an imminent threat when their own neighbors bordering them didn't think they were a threat?
Very good point. I guess there's one neighbor of theirs that considered them a threat. I don't know which neighbor would you be referring to? Well, actually, it's not directly adjacent, but Israel's a couple of 100 miles away.
Well, Israel can take care of themselves. I have nothing against Israel, and I hate all the bombings that have gone on there, but I would not invade Iraq to help Israel. They can bomb it themselves.
All right. Yeah, I've watched a lot of Fox News, and I've been waiting for somebody to say that.
Well, I'm not a peacenik or a flower child. I have 4 sons in the military. I mean, I have nothing against a strong military, strong defense, or military actions, but so I have nothing against what the countries are doing. Israel can take care of themselves. We give them billions of dollars every year.
A lot has been made in this past week about the photos that were leaked from a civilian contractor at the Dover Air Force Base, and many more that were a little technical difficulty there. But anyways, I'm joined on the phone by Larry Syverson from Military Families Speak Out. You can look them up at mfso.org on the internet. And, sir, right when the phone cut out, I was trying to get to a question here about the photos that have been released in the last week. And there's been a lot of hoopla on the news, especially on TV news, about these photos. Some of them were leaked by a civilian contractor at Dover, and many more were released to the memoryhole.org by a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. And I wonder if you've seen those pictures and what you make of that whole incident.
Yes, I did see them. I saw them on the internet, and it showed that our fallen soldiers are coming back to the U.S. And treated with respect by the soldiers that are handling them. But I'm glad that flag draped coffin, the photos have been released. Back last month, I protested at Dover Air Force Base with Military Families Speak Out, and we were asking the military to please honor the dead. They didn't live in silence, and their lives weren't hidden, but once they're dead, all of a sudden their lives are now not worth anything. And we wanted to allow the press to Dover, and more importantly, we wanted to allow military families to Dover to greet their fallen soldiers. And
that's not allowed right now for the families to meet?
No, families are not allowed.
No, not even the families.
No, I spoke with 2 families that begged and pleaded to go to Dover and meet their son as his body was returned. And one family was in July, they were denied flat out all at the very beginning. And a mom that I know from New Jersey, her son was killed in February, begged and pleaded enough with the Army and with her congressman that finally they said, okay, you can meet your son's body. And she said, great. And they said it'll be there in an hour and a half. And she lives in New Jersey. This was Dover. So it really hurt her feelings a lot that when they finally said yes, it was more window dressing because they knew there was no way she was going to make it to Dover. But right now, even military families, the parents, the wives, they're not allowed to greet the bodies as they come back. It's appalling. It's one thing that we're very upset about. It's like they're hiding the real cost of the human cost of the war from the American people, and they're snuck back into the country under cover of darkness.
Yeah, there's, I think, many sides to this debate. One group of people say, well, it's illegal, and whoever gave out those pictures shouldn't have, basically just for bureaucratic reasons. But as far as principles go, there are some who say that it's demoralizing to the troops and to the families of troops, and that they shouldn't have to bear witness to that when it does nothing but hurt them and hurt the war effort.
But I talked with my sons about it. In fact, I talked with Bryce while he was in Baghdad about it. He did not know that the soldiers' bodies were snuck into the country at night. And as a quote, he said, it's disgusting. We should be treated with dignity and respect. He was appalled that that's the treatment. The soldiers don't like it. And as far as the military families, I've spoken with 7 military families that have lost sons, and to the person they say that they wanted America to welcome their son back, not hidden. And to talk about demoralizing the troops by not welcoming their bodies back to the U.S., to me, that's just the opposite. It seems like they would think that if they're not coming back with full honors, that they're being snuck in. It means that that they've done something wrong. I think it gives them the wrong impression. And with Bryce, I really can't tell you what he said. That was kind of softened up part of it for radio, because he was livid that that's what's happening to the troops' bodies as they come back. He said he sure wouldn't want me to put up with that, and I would probably scale the fence. I would be arrested to greet his body.
Why do you think that the administration doesn't want those pictures out?
Oh, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's all based on politics. The administration looks at they're trying to keep the war toll down as far as what the American people are hearing, and so they'll say this many killed or injured each day, but they don't put a face on the soldiers, and they're not showing the coffins. What the Bush administration is afraid of, that every one of those coffins that's shown, that they're going to lose a percentage of the voters at the election. But, I mean, it is two-faced, the way they're looking at it, because if you remember, in the president's very first re-election ad, he showed the flag-draped body of a 9/11 victim to gain a vote. So, he's throwing out the flag-draped bodies for 9/11 and hurting those people's family, the 9/11 family victims' feelings to get a vote, and then he's not showing the military families' bodies because he doesn't want to lose a vote, and he's hurting those. So it smacks of hypocrisy, and again, this military that's taking it on the chin. If you remember back in the summer, in July, one of the first phone calls I got from Bryce, he was livid, and he was calling me to contact his congressman because he had heard that after the president, quote-unquote, declared the war over, major military combat over May 1st, well, it was no longer a war zone. So, we're paying Halliburton and Bechtel and Brown and Root billions and billions of dollars, but we need to cut back somewhere. So in the summer, we're not in a war zone anymore. So the soldiers were taking it on the chin, and they were trying to cut back on their family separation pay and hazardous duty pay, which is about $225 per month per soldier. And Bryce called me to contact his congressman that was ridiculous, that the way they're going to cut costs was on the soldiers' backs. And fortunately, enough people complained about that they backed off. But it just shows the administration keeps saying, oh, well, we support the troops. We'll help them any way they can. And then they sneak their bodies into the country, and the first thing they try to do to save money is to cut their pay while they're dodging bullets. And to the soldiers, it's still a war zone. Brandon told me that any day a soldier dies, it's a war zone. And he was telling me that right after he got back in March, and it was kind of slow. He said, yes, it's still a war because soldiers are dying.
And 713 soldiers have been killed so far. Officially 4,000, but as many as 7,000 have been wounded. And the U.S. forces may have killed as many as 10,000 Iraqi civilians. So it sure sounds like it's a war zone since last May 1st to me.
Yeah, yes, it definitely has. That was all. He was just impatient and wanted to move on. And probably if things had gone as planned and we'd gotten down to, because they were saying it that summer, we'd be down to 30,000 troops in the summertime, that we would have probably invaded Syria and Iran. But that's why he was wanting to say that one was over with. He wanted to move on to other territory. Short attention span, I guess. Look at Afghanistan. We didn't finish it before we moved into Iraq, and so he was already looking for someplace else, and it just hasn't worked out the way they planned it. In any way they looked at it, it's been wrong on what the conditions are on the ground in Iraq.
That's interesting. It was supposed to be down to 30,000 troops by last summer, and yet I just read something this morning about General Myers saying that we're going to be in Iraq for decades.
Oh, yes, the soldiers already know it. In the summer, Bryce kept asking me, how long are we going to be here? How long are we going to be here? Because they weren't telling the soldiers. And I told him I would try to find out, and I would read through the Internet, and I found out that it looked like the soldiers would be there for a year, and then we'd be pretty much gone. And so when the next time he called, I told him that, and he said that it was strange that I would say a year because they just announced an $11 billion contract to Brown and Root to be spread over the next 10 years to build barracks for the soldiers at the Baghdad airport. So, that's at the time they're telling us we'll be out of there, and we'll be there only as long as necessary and not a day longer, and yet they're spending $11 billion to build barracks. And I would say that Baghdad fell in mid-April. Bryce went into Baghdad May 15th, almost 1 month to the day Baghdad fell. And when he called, the first thing he told me that there was a Burger King had opened up in Baghdad. So they were planning the troops to be there for a long time. And I was like, a fast food restaurant? Why are we having Burger Kings in Iraq when we're just supposed to be in and out? And I've thought of a little joke about that, and it's George Bush fed us a Whopper to get us into Iraq, and now he's feeding the troops Whoppers to keep them there. So that's about as light as I'll get today.
Well, and you mentioned these contracts to Bechtel and Kellogg Brown and Root, the Halliburton subsidiary, and I don't know if you know, but there was a report by Marketplace from National Public Radio. That program, they did an investigation and found that 20% of the money spent in Iraq is being lost to corruption, either by the American companies or the local Iraqis that we're dealing with. Fully a fifth of the money spent is just wasted on criminals.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's only when they're called on it do they step forward. It's the way it is with Halliburton with the gasoline, where they were charging an outrageous amount for the gasoline compared to what they were paying. And it's just not a good idea when you get contractors to go in to do some things that the soldiers should still be doing. When Brandon first went into Tikrit, it was still very dangerous in April. And we were sending in care packages and mail. And it took about a month to 6 weeks before he got the mail. And he was only eating MREs, and they were running out of... We're down to 1 or 2 MREs a day. He said usually he eats about 5 or 6, but he's a big guy. He was eating one or two. He lost about 35 pounds, and they had very little water. And what the problem was, Halliburton was responsible for taking the supplies in the mail to the soldiers, and because it was still considered a war zone, well, they didn't want to send their employees into that area. So what happened was the soldiers then went without, and he lost 35 pounds during that duration. And if it had been soldiers doing it, doing the mail, doing the food, you know that they would have gotten it to their comrades. So it's sometimes when they're trying to give out these contracts, there are certain things I think they should think twice about doing it. That backfired. And again, it was the troops that took it on the chin on that. 35 pounds is a lot for someone to lose over a summer when you're not on a diet.
About parents and families back home sending body armor over to the troops because apparently, what do they call him? Uncle Sam, the national government that is somehow supposed to be considered a relative, doesn't see fit to give our guys enough body armor to protect themselves, and also has them driving around in Humvees made out of aluminum that don't have the slightest bit of armor on them whatsoever. I was wondering if you've heard from your son over there any anecdotes along those lines, whether he has his own armor or not.
Well, Brandon and Bryce, being both regular Army, both frontline troops, they did get the armor. When the parents that I talked to that were having problems with that were primarily, it was the National Guard and the Reserves, because they've always kind of gotten cast-offs here in the U.S., and then when they got over there, well, the regular Army pretty much had what they needed, and it was these other that were trying to scrounge around. So Brandon and Bryce weren't affected by that, but I spoke with several families that actually did. They were made. I live in Virginia here in Richmond, and they were made up in Northern Virginia. And I knew several families that actually did send those ceramic plates to their sons. One unit, there were 120 guys, and they had 35 of the vests. And it was just like Russian roulette. When you went out, you didn't know if you'd be the one to have one. And the parents that were scared to death for their sons. They were about $1,100 to buy the parts for them, and that most of them were trying to get them for the unit. And it was a trying time last summer when that was going on. That was around in August, September, October when I was hearing about that. And as far as the armored Humvees, Bryce has driven a Humvee quite a bit. He's been driving a General around occasionally in Baghdad, and also he was a gunner sometimes on the Humvees. And when he told me he was going to be driving in Baghdad all the time with these Humvees, I told him, well, that's great. You know, do you have one of the armored ones? And he says, yes, we have one of the armored ones, but we took all the armored off. We took the doors off. He said that when they're hit with an RPG and it goes inside and explodes, they're all dead, and if they get attacked, they want to be able to jump out immediately. So what he does, he says he drives with one hand on the steering wheel and one hand with a pistol out the door, pointing it, and he says he doesn't stop at stop signs, doesn't stop at traffic lights. He weaves in and out of traffic because he doesn't want to get boxed in because it's easy to get ambushed. He said that you have to show the Iraqis that at every single minute you're alert or otherwise you're dead. He said it's he's commented on the Iraqis. He said when he's out driving around, he just sees the hate in their eyes. And he says about 25% of the people in Baghdad don't like them. And when you think it's a city of about 4 million, that means there's about 1 million people that would just as soon see you dead. So when they say, only 25% of the people don't really like us being there, in a city like Baghdad, that's still 1 million people that just hate your guts. And that's not good odds. That's a lot of people not liking you being in town.
It makes me question the idea that these guys are driving around in Humvees on missions that seem like they ought to be in some sort of armored personnel carrier or some kind of thing. Aren't Humvees or Jeeps supposed to be for driving messages around behind the lines, not driving around among the enemy?
That's right. Because Bryce talked about that the Humvees really should be out in the desert area because they're not as protected because with the way the armor is on them. But with the Bradleys, they were tearing up the streets and it was wearing down the Bradleys. So that's why they haven't been sending as many Bradleys on patrols. It's the Humvees. And it's strictly because of the wear and tear, which isn't fair to the soldiers. Then, they're the ones that are taking the chances.
Sir, I noticed two things in searching the web this morning. First of all, that according to the BBC, 7 more American soldiers died today. And secondly, that you, in your statements that I found on the Military Family Speak Out website, you often refer to the war being over in the minds of most Americans. I think one of the anecdotes was as you stand out in front of the courthouse with your sign, people yell, "Hey, dumbass, the war's been over for a year. What are you talking about?"
Oh, yeah. Well, that was going on, especially May 1st, when the president declared the war for all practical purpose over. Dozens and dozens of people would, yell me, "Haven't you read the newspaper? Go home. The war's over." And so we started saying, they'd say, "Yeah, the war's over." And so we'd yell, "The war's over. Bring the troops home." Well, if it's over, they should be. And then everybody thought when Uday and Uday, the two sons, would be killed, then the war would be over. And then they thought, well, when Saddam is captured, then the war will be over. And as long as we're there, I asked Brandon, is the war over? And he said, no, as long as the soldiers dying. But most people have moved on and have other important things to worry about in life. And it's just been since probably in November, there was with a few of the helicopters that were shot down and the death toll was higher that month, there was a lot of interest in that the war is still a war again. But it just peaked again in early April with the number of soldiers being killed. I see it on the street when I'm out there on really bad days when it's been bad news. I have a song that says "Honk for Peace." A lot of people will honk and show their support, and it's on their minds. But my wife, will talk about, everybody's moved on, and I'm stuck. That's what she says. Everybody's moved on, and I'm still stuck worrying about my sons in Iraq. But when you look at it, during the time period, there were about 100,000 troops there. And if you say each soldier had about 10 people that were worrying about him and praying about him that were family members, well, that's about 1 million Americans. And when you think there's 250 million of us, there's 249 million Americans that have no connection whatsoever to Iraq. And when the president said the war was over in May, well, they moved on, and the 1 million of us that are still worried, but we stayed there, and it's quite noticeable, during certain times that the interest isn't there. And a big part of what I try to do down on the street is with my sign, it has Brandon and Bryce's picture on it. I have one now with just Bryce's picture on it. But I want to remind people there's a war going on, soldiers are dying, and I want to put a face on the soldiers in Iraq. So when people stop and look at the sign, they'll think that, here's a young man that's in Iraq. I'm trying to remind people that Iraq's a very dangerous place, and, we should be concerned about our sons and daughters that are over there.
Well, and, that goes, the picture on the sign goes to the whole idea that, human beings are individuals. And, even for myself, and I pay attention to what's going on over there as much as I can, you see the number 713, and the number's growing, bigger and bigger every day. But once you see the photographs of those coffins, there's only one body per coffin. And it reminds you that these are real human beings. These are our friends and neighbors and their sons who are dying in their teens and in their 20s.
Right, a lot of them are young. And the pictures that they're showing, there's anywhere from 19, 20, 21 coffins lined up in there. It's not like 2 or 3. There's 3 rows of them, and it's very, there's the impact. It's showing what you're saying. There's a son or daughter or husband or wife in each one of those.
Yeah, or father.
Yes, fathers, yes. My son Brandon has 3 children, so yes, it could be a father also.
Well, what do you think should be done? Just pull them out and leave it to the Iraqis and say sorry for bombing you and just head home as fast as possible?
Well, I've talked with 3 Iraqis. I've actually, in my travels around parts of the East Coast, I've met 3 Iraqis, and they want us to leave. They say that they find it condescending that we go in and disrupt their country, and then we don't leave, and we tell them that, well, you can't handle the country right now. You need to leave. And they're like, we're adults. Our civilization is 4,000 years old. We can handle it. So for the 3 Iraqis I've met, they want us to leave, and they say that can it be any worse than it is now? It's so close to civil war right now. I don't really see how it would be any different. And I would like to. I thought of a comment about the. I've been pretty negative about the administration. I know about the war, so I would like to at least say one thing in positive. And Cheney and Wolfowitz were right when they told us that the Iraqis would welcome us with open arms, because when Brandon went into Tikrit in April, the people welcomed him warmly. They were so glad to see him. He said that they brought him fruit and juices and chicken and homemade bread, and that they were just really glad to see him.
Sunni Triangle, right? Isn't that near?
Yeah, Tikrit, Saddam's hometown. Yeah.
Okay.
So they were really glad to see him, and so in May he wrote a letter and said that he would like to move to Iraq. He knew they'd be putting troops there, and he would like to move to Iraq with his wife and 3 children and live there and help the Iraqis with their lives. And then out of the blue in August we get a letter, and he said that now when they go out on patrols, the children are throwing rocks at them. And he said, even though we're big soldiers, and I know it doesn't look good, he said, we throw rocks back at the kids. And so I'm thinking, this isn't the way to make friends. And so the next time I talked to him on the phone, I kind of, as a father, I scolded him about Brandon. Y'all are these big soldiers. You shouldn't be throwing rocks at kids. And he said, well, Dad, when it's the men throwing rocks, we fire our guns over their heads to break them up. And he said, we just can't shoot our guns at children and fire over their heads. So it showed that we really were welcomed in April and May. They were glad to see us. But by August, we had worn our welcome out. They considered us no longer liberators but occupiers, and they wanted us out of there. Brandon started noticing it to where by October, he started writing letters and emails. He's quitting the Army. There's no way he'd ever go back, that Iraq sucks. It's a horrible place. He hates the Iraqis. They're all lazy. And so not only did we outwear our welcome where they wanted us to go, but a soldier that was in the middle of it watching it every day who really wanted to move there with his family and joined as a career and to make it a 20-year career in 89, he's quitting the Army. He gets out in September. He said there's no way he'll re-enlist because he will not go back to Iraq. And so there's something on the ground there. The Iraqis don't like us there, and the soldiers notice it. For Bryce is also quitting. He is not re-enlisting either, and he went in his career in 97. So both my sons have decided that they will not re-enlist.
Well, and that
because
is
of
if they're
Iraq.
allowed out. All Rumsfeld has to do is sign a stop-loss order and prevent them from getting out, right? He's already done that,
yes.
12 times?
Yes, that's exactly true. Brandon's really worried because he hopes to get out in September, and September 5th. And it's kind of an interesting story. Brandon got, when the Army kept saying all along that they would not, when they're deployed to a war zone, that it will not affect their upward mobility and their promotions and advancement in rank. And Brandon went over as a staff sergeant, and in the summer he got promoted to sergeant first class. And they told him that in September he would come back to the U.S. to Fort Knox, because he's a tanker, that he would come back to Fort Knox for non-commissioned officer school, and for 4 months. And so we were all really excited that he was going to be getting out of Iraq. And then at the last minute they said, well, there's no one for you to take your place in Iraq. You have to stay. And they said, but there'll be one in January, so you can go back to the States around December 15th for Christmas, and then go on to Fort Knox for the training, for the non-com training. And so Brandon wrote and told me, well, I missed the first one, but the second one looks good. And well, I told him, don't count your chickens before they hatch. And in early December, they said, well, there's no one to take your place, to take your place in Iraq. You have to stay. Well, he didn't get to go to the train. They denied both trainings for him. So now when he got back to the States in March, he told them, I'm not re-enlisting. And they said, well, you're a sergeant first class and you don't have the training for it. We're knocking you back down to staff sergeant, and we're taking all of your pay raise back to July when you got it. So his first check this month, they took out $2,200 of his salary that he had for sergeant first class, and he had wanted to do early out for July, but because they took all this money out, he can't afford it, and he's got to stay until September to when he gets out September 5th. And now he's afraid with the problems going on over there. They've already said that the 4th Infantry will go back earlier than planned, and that means the stop-loss thing will swing back, and he's hoping that he doesn't get caught on the stop-loss. So we were pretty upset. It was pretty crummy to take that money away from a soldier. He was doing the job over there, but it's just, it's another way they stab him in the back, and then they wonder, well, why aren't they re-enlisting? And, Brandon said, they can't pay me enough after that to get me to stay in. And they said, well, if he did decide to stay in, that he would still have to wait 3 years to get back up to sergeant first class. So, pretty crummy. You agree?
Yeah, it sure sounds like a stab in the back. And, you point out that, there's recent violence. Things are getting worse there recently. Before, it seemed like the problems, well, at least according to television, the problems were mostly up where the Sunnis live, north of Baghdad, but south of the Kurds. And now we have all this problem with the Shia, where not all of them, but a substantial number of Shia have declared their own sort of jihad against us. And it seems especially, really this whole month, since April 1st, that really, I guess it was the end of last month when they shut down Sadr's newspaper.
Exactly.
And everything just exploded down there in some of the stronger Shia areas of Baghdad and in other places. And also there's been big problems in Fallujah. They were saying all week that, and this is actually good news if you wait till the end of it, earlier in the week they were saying to the city of Fallujah, which is between 300,000 and 500,000 people, which, is a good 3 or 5 times the size of Austin, Texas, which is a lot of people, told them that they have a week to get out. And anybody who's left in the city at the end of the week will be considered an enemy. And first of all, that sounds just completely impossible for that to be expected for the non-combatants to get out of Fallujah.
Exactly.
The kind of order that Darth Vader would give rather than the United States of America, the great liberators. But I did read this morning that they've possibly made a deal, this is hopeful at least, that they've made a deal to avert the coming attack on Fallujah. And I suppose we'll see how that pans out.
The most recent news I heard was that Bush was at Camp David talking to his national security people about how to solve the situation, and that he wants to invade the city because we have to show the insurgents who's boss. And the problem is that all these the sheiks in the area are saying that if you invade Fallujah, the whole country is, he's swearing, there'll be 100 Fallujahs across Iraq. And it's the same thing with Sadr. They closed down his newspaper thinking, oh, well, it won't make any difference. And then, there was all this unrest for 2 weeks just about a newspaper being closed. Well, just today they're saying that, well, if we kill Sadr, we think he'll only be unrest for about 3 days. Well, it's like, oh my gosh, who can say, if the whole country went in uproar, the southern half of the country, which has never been a problem with the U.S., they closed the newspaper, the part of the country they never had a problem with is in unrest for 2 weeks. Now today they say, oh, well, if we can sneak in and kill Sadr, it'll only be for 3 days. It's like, what planet are these guys on? They put themselves into problems where there is no good way out. we've surrounded Fallujah, and we've given them an ultimatum. Okay, if you don't come out, we're going to invade the city. Well, first of all, if they're not coming out. They're calling us on it. Well, if we go in, we alienate all the Iraqis. Well, if we don't go in, we're showing the enemy that, hey, if you talk tough enough with us, we'll back down. So Bush, unfortunately, we went into Iraq for him to save face with his dad by getting rid of Saddam for his dad. He saved face with the Bush family. Now we're going to have to go into Fallujah, no telling how many more people are going to be killed on both sides for Bush to save face for the U.S. because they got us into this, and it's just a huge mess. And now we're surrounded in Najaf, the holiest city. It's like the Vatican for the Catholics. It's the holiest city for the Shias, and we're telling Sadr if he doesn't come out, well, we might invade the city, or we're going to sneak in and kill you. And it's like either way, there we're going to lose because by letting them keep the city, we're again showing that, hey, we're backing down. So I would not want to be Bush this weekend trying to make this decision, but then from the news I heard, I was reading the New York Times right before you called, they're debating it right now, discussing what they're going to do, and they'll make a decision this weekend. But they said they would tell the locals, the people, they'll have so many days to get out of town. But where are they going to go? 300,000 people all of a sudden trying to jam and get out. Most of them don't have cars. Where are they going to go? The whole country's going to erupt, and now these people are homeless out on the highways and in the slums of Baghdad. It's just a horrible situation, and there is no good way out except to just get out of Dodge. But I'm the wrong person to ask because I just want us out of there.
What makes them think that the fighters won't leave with the rest of the refugees? Okay, everybody who's not going to fight us, get out of the city, and anybody who wants some, go ahead and stay put so we can kill you. And that doesn't make any sense in the first place.
No, it doesn't, because that's what happened when we did the invasion, and they kept talking about the Republican Guard, the Republican Guard, the Republican Guard, and there wasn't one. It's because they just melted into the civilian population to just pick off the convoys as they go by, which they've done all over again, and now they're talking about shortages with the military and with the provisional government there, because they just melded into the society, and they're protecting them, and that if Fallujah starts looking bad, they'll just blend in with the non-combatants, and they're not coming forward and pointing them out. The non-combatants aren't.
Yeah. Well, and you ask, what planet are these people on? this whole show them who's boss kind of mentality. I have to say, it reminds me a lot of Israel. If you take the analogy of Iraq as America's West Bank, that, well, if we just assassinate this leader and bulldoze some houses in this neighborhood and wrap some razor wire around those people, well, that'll show them that they can't beat us, and then they'll stop trying to. And that's the approach they've tried in Israel for quite a few decades now, and it doesn't seem to work out very well. It seems like they never really understand that they're supposed to stop fighting now.
Exactly. And then, Bush didn't help the situation any last week, or week before last, when he meets with Sharon and gives him the okay to keep the wall up and to keep the Palestinians that have been displaced, keeping them out. That is just another reason. The analogy of the Israel and the Palestinians and the Americans and the Iraqis, it's just inflaming more of this dislike toward the Americans, because they always thought we were in bed with Israel, and George Bush showed it when he said that to Sharon, and because a lot of them thought he was doing this for Sharon anyway.
And what actually happened was, in the last couple of leaders of Hamas that Israel has assassinated, there was immediate reaction in Iraq against our guys, who, most of our military guys over there, they have no understanding of why anyone would want to think that they represent Israel. What do they have to do with Israel? And yet, they kill the leader of Hamas, and all of a sudden everything in Fallujah flares right back up again. And, our poor guys are over there wondering, what the hell does this have to do with them?
Yep. It's feeding on itself with everything we do. none of it used to be. They tried to tell us we went in with good intentions, and some of the things we've tried to do have been with good intentions. But now the situation is to where there's nothing that we can do to make things better. Invading pollution isn't. Killing Sauter isn't. I mean, it's gonna. Brimmer will be happy that those people are gone, but he's leaving, and June 30th, his time's up, and he's leaving. So he's gonna get out while the getting's good.
Yeah. And, speaking of Paul Bremer, I just saw something, I think it was this morning's New York Times, has Paul Bremer, with no irony whatsoever, by the way, going on TV in Iraq and saying, if you don't defend your country, it will not be saved. And by defend your country, of course, he means join us, the foreigners, in killing your neighbors.
Exactly. I thought that was just unbelievable that he would say that. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I just laughed. I thought, do you know what you just said? They're defending their country against the invaders, and yet they're the bad. But no. You need to defend us, the invaders. So it's really a little twist on words, and I can't imagine how it would not. How the Iraqis would. I hope that when it's translated into Arabic, that it doesn't give that connotation.
Oh, no. I kind of wonder sometimes, like, do these people hear themselves talking? I mean, does he understand beforehand that, well, let's see if I can get this by him? Or does he really believe that? Can he really say that out loud without even noticing the irony of the situation?
Well, Wolfowitz back in the summer was talking about he didn't like all this foreign intervention into Iraq, and he wanted those people there to get out. And it's like, what about us? It's the same thing, talking about foreign intervention, but it didn't include us because now we're the government there.
Yeah, it reminds me, I heard on Republican radio not too long ago, they had a Muslim scholar on, and they were asking him about, where's the outcry among Muslim leadership against these people who are attacking our guys and acting like terrorists? Why aren't they telling them to stop being terrorists? And the Muslim guy says, well, but, there's a lot of Christians killing a lot of Muslims, too, and they, from their end, they tend to see this as, a holy war against them by the Christians. And the Republican host of the show is screaming at the top of his lungs, show me one example. I can't think of a single example of the Christians killing the Muslims. And
really?
the person on the show is saying, yeah, man, we've invaded Iraq. We've killed thousands and thousands of people. I'm sorry. That's just a total non sequitur to a Republican.
They don't, because they won't say how many Iraqis were killed during the invasion and the bombing and then this, because they don't want to put faces or numbers with them. They're making them think inhuman. And then the president, when he was giving his press conference, he used the word crusade again, which is just a bad connotation again. It's the Christians going in and invading a Muslim country. So the wording that they use is just not working, and we're making them non-people. In exactly what you were saying, we've made them non-people, that they don't matter by saying, show me one time, and then we would several thousand. Just 700 in Fallujah alone.
Yeah, we're almost up on the end of time here, but I think we have time for you to tell us a little bit about the organization itself, which is how I got interested in you. Military Families Speak Out.
It was started by a couple in Boston. It was by Charlie Richardson and Nancy Leeson. They live in Massachusetts, in Boston, and they have a son in the Marines. And in November of 2002, they started Military Families Speak Out with one other couple, and to try to keep their son from going to war in Iraq, to keep the war from happening. And then the war happened. He went over, served his time. He got out. He came back Memorial Day last year, and it was slow growing. I joined it in April, right before Brandon and Bryce went into Iraq, and it's Military Families Speak Out, and it's military families that are against it was the war, and now it's the occupation in Iraq. It's mothers and fathers, there's aunts and uncles, wives and children in it. And it was slow growing around about 600 members until July, when the president gave his infamous bring 'em on speech. And that really upset a lot of military families, that the president would egg on the guerrillas to try to take out our sons and daughters and husbands and wives.
Yeah, what does
and
he care?
Almost overnight it grew to 1,000, and now it's around 1,500. And it can be at mfso.org or militaryfamiliespeakout.org. But we're just trying to let people know that even though you're a military family, it's still okay to speak out. You can still be a patriot and voice your opinion. And both my sons have been okay with me speaking out against war. They know that there's a difference between supporting the war effort and supporting the troops, and they know that my support and love as a father, the best support I can give them is to get them out, not enable the government to keep them there.
And it's true that every day at lunch hour you spend your hour out in front of the federal courthouse in Richmond, Virginia?
I've gone down to every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and yesterday was my 142nd time. And I got down to about 10% of the time I've been alone. Most of the time there have been 2 or 3, but since April, with all the activity, there have been anywhere from 8 to 11 down there now. So the people are starting to get a little worried, and rightly so. It's an extremely volatile time period right now. In the next just couple of weeks, or even could be Monday or Tuesday, the whole country could go up in flames once Fallujah or something happens in with Sadr. So this is a horrible time right now for any person that has a loved one in Iraq, and for Americans in general that are worried about the military.
Yeah, I think everybody probably has a friend or family member or a couple of degrees of separation away from somebody over there, and let's sincerely hope that it doesn't blow up and get worse than it has been this month.
I sure hope so. I pray for that every day.
Well, I sure hope your boys come home safe and sound. Everybody, Larry Syverson, he's from Military Families Speak Out, and the website is mfso.org. Any closing comments, sir? Anything that I should have asked you that I forgot about?
My only comment would bring the troops home. The best support we can give the troops is to bring them home.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. I appreciate being able to talk about my sons with your listeners today.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, I'm Philip Drew, and thank you for listening to the Weekend Interview Show on Radio Chaos. I sure appreciate all the Chaos crew giving me an opportunity to do my talk show on here. I try really hard to put something good together for you so I don't disappoint. But I'm going to let you guys get back to your rock and roll. So right here is the Dayglow Abortions, and then coming up next is the Shorty Show. You're listening to Radio Chaos, 95.9 FM in Austin, Texas.